Caleb Ashford cooked to dominate. In the world of haute cuisine, he was the name whispered behind closed doors. Youngest executive chef in New York to earn 2 Michelin stars before turning 30. His plates were flawless, his posture sharp. His interviews, dangerous. He was bold on camera, brutal in the kitchen, and magnetic in every headline. His restaurant, Ash, had a 6-month wait list. His father, a culinary mogul with 50 franchises, called him the only one with real edge. But that edge eventually cut too deep. One night, during a live interview after a televised charity dinner, a food critic joked about Caleb's impossibly perfect ego. Caleb didn't laugh. He snapped. The video went viral. He dismissed half his kitchen staff the next morning, also on camera. The fallout was immediate. Investors pulled. Guests canceled. The board of directors, which included his father, called an emergency meeting. You need distance, they told him. Time away from city's cameras, pressure. Go work in a quiet kitchen, somewhere no one knows your name. They found a small listing on an outdated job board, a chef owner in a coastal Maine town, looking for temporary help. Caleb was told it was anonymous, quiet, and a contract short enough to keep him visible, but humble. He didn't argue. He packed his knives and left. Meanwhile, in Seafall, Maine, Emily Wren was doing something much harder than haute cuisine, rebuilding a family restaurant with more heart than money. The Wren's Nest had been her grandmother's pride, and her second home. When her grandmother passed away, she inherited more than a key. She inherited a dream, but dreams cost money, and the building, though charming, needed work. She ran it alone, with help from Celeste, her grandmother's lifelong friend who managed the front and filled the gaps. Emily cooked everything from scratch, from memory, from love. She didn't want fame. She wanted survival. And maybe if the, town rallied and fall tourists kept coming, she could keep the lights on through winter. But she was burning out. She needed hands. A sous chef, an assistant, someone. The ad she posted was modest. Help needed in small family kitchen. Must be punctual, teachable, and willing to work hard. Salary, humble. Environment, kind. Dozens viewed it. No one replied, until one day Celeste walked in with a smirk. Someone accepted. He must be desperate, Emily muttered, stirring a pot. He must be human, Celeste countered. He starts tomorrow. Caleb stepped off the train in Seafall wearing a wool coat too nice for the weather and pulling a suitcase that rolled too quietly for a town that still used screen doors. He didn't know anyone. No one knew him. That was the plan. The Wren's Nest looked like something from a faded postcard. Painted shutters, crooked steps, and a sign that looked hand-lettered in a rush. He paused at the door, took a breath, and walked inside. Straight into the smell of garlic and butter and something far too comforting. Emily was plating cornbread behind the counter, hair tied in a loose bun, sleeves rolled. She glanced up, wiped her hands on a towel, and gave him a single nod. You must be Caleb. Yeah. You got your own apron? He paused. I brought knives. She blinked. Cute. He followed her into the kitchen. It was small, well-used and full of the kind of details that mattered. A worn cutting board, recipe cards in handwriting, pots seasoned by time, not brands. He set down his knife case. She pointed to the sink. You wash, I cook. At least today. He didn't argue. That surprised her. By closing, he had chopped vegetables, washed trays, and made stock. She saw his technique. He was no beginner. But he didn't talk about where he came from, and she didn't ask. All she said as she turned off the lights was, "See you at 7." Back in her apartment above the restaurant, Emily wrote her expenses in a notebook and stared at the margins where her grandmother had once doodled flowers. Please let him last a week, she whispered. or at least until the Friday dinner rush. Caleb didn't rent a room. He rented the nicest apartment in Seafall, which wasn't hard. It was a modern loft above an antique bookstore with exposed beams, a working fireplace, and overpriced kitchenware he didn't plan to use. He unpacked in silence and opened a bottle of wine. The first sip was bitter compared to what he was used to. Everything in this town felt muted. No sound of traffic, no skyline. He stood by the window watching fog crawl in from the harbor and muttered, 2 months, that's all. Do what they asked, then disappear. He showed up on time the next morning, black apron tied too neatly, knives ready, hair perfect. Emily nodded when she saw him. No compliments, no sarcasm. Cut mushrooms, she said, pointing at a tray. Uniform size. We don't waste here. Understood, he replied. They worked in near silence. Caleb's cuts were clean, consistent, effortless. Emily noticed, but said nothing. During prep for lunch service, he offered to handle a special dish. Something bold with lamb, fennel, wine reduction, and saffron. She hesitated but relented. He plated it beautifully. The aroma was rich, the color perfect, the balance flawless. Emily raised an eyebrow. That's gorgeous, she admitted, but not what they want. You haven't tasted it, he replied. I don't need to, she said. They won't eat it. When the dish went untouched by the regulars, Caleb shrugged it off, but Emily didn't. She scraped it into a container for compost, every movement tight with control. We don't waste food here, she said low. I'm already below zero. This is survival, not spectacle. That night, he didn't open wine. He boiled water for tea and stared at the walls. He wasn't used to being dismissed, especially when he was right. But part of him, the quieter, growing part, knew this wasn't about right or wrong. It was about place and time. Day 3 began with him arriving early, not to impress, but because the kitchen felt clearer than his own head. He helped Celeste stock supplies without being asked. Emily arrived 30 minutes later, surprised to find everything in place. She didn't comment, just nodded. During lunch, Caleb made a suggestion, to toast the sandwich bread on both sides for better texture. Emily paused, considering. Sure. Try it. It was an improvement, subtle but real. A few customers noticed. Don't get used to applause, Emily muttered. We're still losing money. Later that afternoon, he commented on the outdated POS system. This thing belongs in a museum. Emily raised her head slowly. So does half the town. Try not to insult everything that keeps the lights on. Caleb opened his mouth, then stopped. You're right. That became a pattern. He'd almost say something sarcastic, then catch himself. He didn't apologize, but he learned to pull back, to rephrase, to read the room. Emily noticed. So did Celeste. Your new guy has claws, she whispered once. But he's learning to keep them in. On Thursday, a delivery came late. Emily was panicked and the weekly special depended on fresh ingredients. Caleb offered to adjust the menu, create something simpler, using what they had. Emily watched him move, improvise, not brag, just solve. She gave him a second look. They served stuffed peppers with barley and roasted vegetables instead of the planned stew. Customers loved it. Emily made a mental note to compliment him later, but forgot. That night, he wrote it down in his notebook anyway. Today was calm. Friday's rush was brutal. Orders piled. The grill overheated. Caleb burned. His hand but kept going. Emily noticed the redness and handed him a cold towel without speaking. He took it, met her eyes, and nodded. No thank you. No pride. Just understanding. After closing, she stayed behind to mop. Caleb offered to finish the dishes. You don't have to, she said. I know, he replied, already rolling up his sleeves. They worked in silence, the kind that felt heavier than noise but lighter than distance. She finally broke it. You cook like someone who's been watched their whole life. He looked up. Maybe I have. She paused, then went back to mopping. She didn't ask more. He didn't explain. But something in the air softened between them. That weekend, Emily caught him reading her grandmother's recipe journal during a break. She didn't scold him, she simply said, "Some of those notes are mine." "I know," he replied. "The handwriting's different. Yours is tighter, more anxious." She blinked, surprised. "You notice that?" Caleb closed the book carefully. "I notice a lot more here than I did back home." Emily didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. Saturday morning started with the smell of cinnamon and warm butter wafting through the restaurant. Emily walked into the kitchen just as the last tray of pastries came out of the oven. Celeste raised her eyebrows. "This new guy? He doesn't sleep, does he?" Emily poured herself coffee, tasting the air. "He made the cinnamon rolls, too. Said he wanted to try an old method with a newer dough." Celeste took a bite, eyes closing dramatically. "If he ever leaves, chain him to the oven. These are dangerous." A few minutes later, Sophie, a childhood friend of Emily, walked in with her toddler and ordered the breakfast plate. She took one bite and narrowed her eyes. "You didn't make this." Emily nodded. It was Caleb. Sophie's eyes widened. "Someone agreed to be your kitchen slave?" Emily laughed, shaking her head. "Don't start." Sophie smirked. "I'm just saying, if he knows how to cook and clean, maybe I need an application too." Just then, Caleb passed by, wiping his hands on a towel. Sophie leaned closer. "Please tell me you've looked at that man." Emily opened her mouth to dismiss it, but didn't. She turned to glance at Caleb. Really glance, the way his sleeves were always rolled, the way he moved like he was holding something back. She'd seen him for days now. But somehow, this felt like the first time. He caught her gaze for a second. Not long enough to say anything, but long enough for her to look away first. That night, after closing, Emily returned to the kitchen to finish inventory. Caleb had already left. The kitchen was spotless, and beside the recipe journal was a single loose sheet. She picked it up without thinking, and paused when she read the header. June 18th, Community Tasting Night. Below that, he'd sketched a proposed menu. 3 courses, all built around traditional dishes, but with delicate updates. Handwritten. Notes detailed sourcing local produce, revisiting her grandmother's soup, offering a free dessert for first-time visitors. She blinked, heart strangely tight. June 18th wasn't just any day. It had been the date of the annual tasting her grandmother created every summer. A single evening of music, shared tables, and food that brought everyone together, no matter what was happening in town. She hadn't done it since her grandmother died. She told herself people forgot, that it didn't matter anymore. But clearly someone hadn't forgotten, even if it wasn't someone who'd lived it firsthand. Emily set the paper down slowly, unsure what she felt. He hadn't shown her. He hadn't bragged. He just planned it like it was obvious, like he knew it still mattered. And something about that made her chest feel like it was both swelling and breaking. The next morning, she didn't mention it. Not at first. She watched him move through prep like always, precise and a little too quiet. When he passed her a bag of flour, she caught his wrist briefly. "June 18th, she said softly. He didn't meet her eyes, just nodded. "I saw the date in the journal. Figured it used to be something." "It was," she said. "It was everything." He paused. We don't have to. No, she interrupted. We do. For the rest of the day, their rhythm was different. Not softer, but aligned. They passed ingredients wordlessly, adjusted timing without needing to check. Something was shifting, not dramatically, but steadily. Like a tide rising, one wave at a time. During the break between lunch and dinner, Celeste caught Emily staring out the window with a notebook in hand. You look haunted. Emily didn't look up. He wants to cook like her, not replace her, just honor her. Celeste smiled. Maybe he's not here to be seen. Maybe he's here to see. That night, while locking up, Emily found a note from Caleb beside the oven timer. Inventory's done. Stove's off. Let me know if you want help with the flyers. She held the paper a little longer than she needed to. In her apartment, she finally sat and opened the recipe journal. She flipped to June 18th from 3 years ago. The last entry in her grandmother's hand read, "Feed them like it's the only thing that matters, because sometimes it is." Emily wiped a tear with the side of her wrist. Then she picked up her phone and texted Caleb. We're doing it. I'll handle the chairs. You handle the fire. Caleb saw the message light up on his phone just as he buttoned his shirt. Across the room, a woman was slipping her heels back on, tousling her hair in the mirror without much care. He stared at the screen longer than necessary, jaw tight. His thumb hovered but didn't reply. The woman glanced back at him, smirking slightly. So, I'll see you tomorrow night. He ran a hand down his face, sighing. No, I don't think that's a good idea. You sure? She asked, arching a brow. You seemed pretty into it an hour ago. He looked at her, not unkindly but distantly. Yeah, I'm sure. I'll text if anything changes. She gave a half laugh, shrugged into her coat, and left without waiting for the usual door-closing line. Caleb sat back down, elbows on knees, hand pressed to his forehead. What the hell am I doing? He thought. This wasn't the plan. He wasn't supposed to care about tastings, town events, or small restaurants with stubborn owners and soft jazz playing from a corner speaker. He was supposed to keep his head down and finish his sentence. But there was that message. And the way she'd said, you handle the fire. He stood up, walked to the bathroom, turned on the water, and stayed under it too long. Steam fogged the mirror while he scrubbed away the parts of himself he didn't understand anymore. Later, wrapped in a towel and lit by the glow of a desk lamp, he flipped open his notebook and began to write. New ideas flowed. Nothing extravagant, just smart. Local herbs in the potato gratin, a honey-glazed tweak for the roasted carrots. He jotted down each thought like it mattered. The next morning, he entered Wren's nest just as Emily was wiping down the prep counter. She handed him coffee without a word, black, no sugar, like he always took it. He raised the mug slightly in acknowledgement. You sure about June 18th? He asked. She nodded. I've been unsure for too long. It deserves to come back. He leaned on the counter beside her, flipping his notebook toward her. I had a few thoughts last night. She scanned the notes, brow slowly rising. You up at 2 a.m. thinking about carrots? He shrugged. Something like that. She pointed at a line under the dessert section. Apple crisp with brown butter and sea salt? Inspired by the cider stand at the fall fair, he said. They burn the edges on purpose. I think we can do that, intentionally. She smiled, small but real. I like it. They spent the next hour tossing ideas back and forth, balancing her grandmother's handwritten notes with Caleb's more refined touches. Every dish told a story. They just had to make sure it spoke the right language. By the time the first customer walked in, the board behind the counter had a fresh, tasting night June 18 banner in chalk, complete with a doodle of a chef's hat and a spoon. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Hope y'all know what you're doing. We never do, Emily replied. But we're still here. That afternoon, Emily was cleaning out the spice drawer when she glanced at Caleb slicing onions with an odd softness in his expression. She hesitated. Hey, do you want to grab dinner tonight? He paused mid-slice. Here? No, she said. Out. Just to talk more about the menu. He nodded slowly. Sure. She almost added something else, but stopped. Instead, she wiped her hands on a towel, hiding a nervous smile. Good. There's a place near the docks, nothing fancy. He nodded again, this time with a hint of something softer. Sounds perfect. At 7 p.m., he was waiting by the docks, leaning against the railing in a charcoal shirt with sleeves rolled, hair a little messy. Emily arrived in a dark denim jacket and black flats, hair down, eyes catching the last orange of the sunset. You. Clean up okay, she teased. He smiled, not wide but honest. So do you. They walked to a quiet table overlooking the harbor, candle flickering between them. The waitress brought bread and wine without asking. Apparently everyone in town knew something before they did. They started with food talk, proportions, sourcing, timing. But before long, they were laughing. Real laughter, like the kind that surprises you with its volume. Emily told a story about burning rice so badly she had to throw out the pot. Caleb admitted to once mistaking salt for sugar on a wedding cake. Midway through the meal, there was a pause. Not awkward, just still. Caleb leaned back slightly. You know I don't do this. What? She asked, sipping wine. Dinners? No, talk like this about things that matter. Emily tilted her head, studying him. Then maybe it's good you're here. Places like this make people slower, softer. Is that what you want? He asked. Softer? She smiled but didn't answer. By the time they walked back, the breeze was cooler, and they moved a little closer. Not touching. Not yet. But close enough to hear the other's breath. After the dinner by the docks, something shifted. Emily didn't say anything the next morning, but she handed Caleb a folded list of ingredients and said, Tonight, after close, if you're free. We can start testing. He nodded, no questions. She walked away, hiding her smile. They prepped through dinner service like any other night. Customers, clean plates, light music in the background. But there was something electric under the rhythm, like the kitchen knew it would stay alive longer tonight. Even Celeste raised an eyebrow. You two doing overtime now? By 10 o'clock, the restaurant was empty, lights low, the windows fogged from the lingering warmth of the ovens. Emily tied her apron again, hair already pulled back. Caleb rolled, his sleeves up, and unwrapped a cloth bundle with his sharpest blades. They started with the soup, her grandmother's recipe, but with a roasted leek variation Caleb suggested. He didn't change much, just deepened the flavor. When she tasted it, her eyes flicked up. That's warmer. Good warmer or off-the-mark warmer. The kind that feels like memory. Next came the apple crisp. Caleb layered the sugar with browned butter and finished with a sea salt flake. Emily assembled the crust. He watched her fingers pinch the dough like it was a language only she could speak. You do that without looking, he said softly. It's muscle memory, she replied. Some of us don't need cameras to perform. She meant it as a tease, but his face tightened slightly. She paused. Sorry, that wasn't fair. He shook his head. No, it's fine, I just forget sometimes how loud I used to be. They stood over the oven together, watching the crisp turn gold behind the glass. Did you like it? She asked. The noise? I liked the control, he admitted. When people listened. when they didn't ask who I was because I made something beautiful. And now? She asked gently. Caleb looked at her. Now I wonder if I ever listened back. Emily didn't answer. She just handed him a spoon and opened the oven. The smell of apples and caramel filled the room. They tasted it side by side. He closed his eyes. Okay, he whispered. Now that's a memory. She leaned against the counter, watching him. Why'd you come here, Caleb? Really? He exhaled, resting both hands flat on the prep table. Because I burned too many bridges to stay, and someone who still believed in me, gave me a lifeline. He didn't say who. She didn't ask. But he looked down like there was more just below the surface. I didn't think you'd care, he added. Most people just want to know if I can cook. I didn't, she said honestly. Not at first, but now, maybe I do. They cleaned together in quiet, letting the steam rise and settle. He dried each knife before placing it carefully back into its roll. She stacked the dishes slower than necessary. Neither wanted to leave first. The night outside was full of fog, like it had been listening too. At the door, he hesitated. Same time tomorrow? She nodded. Same time. He didn't move. You should write down that version of the soup, he added, before we lose it. I won't, she said. I never forget something that makes people feel warm. He walked back to his apartment with a strange kind of ache. Not regret, not desire, but something in between. Something that looked like hope if you tilted your head just right. In his notebook that night he wrote, She's not impressed by brilliance, just by honesty. The next day they tested 2 more dishes after close, a root vegetable tart and a reimagined cornbread with a hint of maple. Emily let Caleb take the lead. He watched her taste things with a calm seriousness, like her approval was rarer than a 5-star review. At one point he accidentally brushed her hand, reaching for the same spoon. She froze. He looked up. There was nothing said, just the kind of moment where something either happens or doesn't. Caleb stepped back first. Sorry. It's fine, she replied, but her voice was lower. Celeste caught them walking out together again and said nothing. But when she passed Emily, a set of folded linens, she whispered, Don't let the heat in the kitchen be the only thing simmering. Emily rolled her eyes, but the redness in her ears said everything. Back at his apartment, Caleb opened the journal again. On the next page, he wrote a new title, The Tasting Night That Wasn't About Me. Underneath it, he listed every ingredient. She'd let him change, and every one she made him keep. On Wednesday morning, the bell over the door rang earlier than usual. A tall brunette walked in, sunglasses on her head and an oversized bag slung over her shoulder. Emily turned, blinking. Madison? The woman grinned. You didn't think I'd miss lobster roll season, did you? They hugged quickly with the warmth of people who had once shared secrets and bedrooms during college. This is your place now? Madison asked, glancing around. God, it smells like your grandma's kitchen in here, in the best way. Emily introduced her to Celeste, then to Caleb, who was elbow-deep in biscuit dough and not expecting to meet anyone new. This is Caleb, Emily said simply. He's helping with the tasting night. Madison smirked. Helping, huh? Her eyes flicked between them. Caleb gave a polite nod, wiped his hands, and returned to the prep table. Madison waited until he was out of earshot. He's cute. Moody, but cute. What's the story? Emily shrugged. He's complicated, but committed. That sounds like the beginning of every great mistake, Madison whispered. That afternoon, Caleb offered to visit the local farmer's market alone to test sourcing for the dessert course. Emily hesitated. but handed him a list. "Don't let them overcharge you just because you look expensive," he smirked. "I'll try to tone down the luxury." At the market he moved quietly between stalls. No sunglasses, no hood. He didn't expect to be seen, but halfway through inspecting apples, a voice called softly behind him. "Aren't you?" He turned slowly. A middle-aged woman squinting. "You're that chef from that show." He smiled politely. "Used to be." She looked unsure, whether to ask for a photo or let him go. "Well," she said eventually, "your tart that week was brilliant. Shame what happened." He nodded, eyes flicking down. "Yeah, it was." Back at the restaurant he was quieter than usual. He prepped everything correctly, stayed late, cleaned more than necessary. Emily caught it. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just off day." After dinner service, she found him at the back table, sketching, plating ideas on a napkin. "Want to talk?" she offered. He hesitated. "You ever have someone look at you and only see your worst moment?" She leaned on the counter beside him. "Sure, everyone does. Yours just got filmed." He laughed once, dry and short. "That's fair." She picked up a napkin and drew a crooked fork. "You know what my grandma used to say? If someone only feeds you judgment, you don't owe them a second bite." He looked at her. Really looked. "That's good," she smiled. She had a million of them, but that one stuck. Caleb folded the napkin carefully, like it was worth keeping. For the rest of the night, he worked lighter. Still focused, but a little less clenched, like he'd taken one breath and decided not to hold it. Madison returned the next day to supervise dessert testing, but mostly just watched Emily and Caleb move like puzzle pieces in a well-used kitchen. She cornered Emily during a break. "He's not just helping. He's building something. With you." Emily didn't answer. She just looked toward the kitchen where Caleb was tasting jam with his eyes closed, nodding to himself. Madison nudged her. "It's okay to let something beautiful happen even if it starts messy." That evening, Emily found a small envelope taped to the cooler. Inside was a recipe card. The handwriting wasn't hers or her grandmother's. It was Caleb's. The title read, "Wren's Tasting Night, Apple Crisp version 3.0. Under it, simple, soft, real, just like she'd want it. She stood holding it longer than necessary. The dining room glowed in amber tones, every table dressed in white linen and scattered with wildflowers. Strings of lights curved above like stars drawn by hand. Emily walked through the restaurant one last time, adjusting a candle, smoothing a napkin. Caleb stood by the kitchen window, silently watching. Guests arrived in pairs and small groups, welcomed by Celeste at the door. Madison played host by pouring sparkling cider and explaining the theme. A tribute to a grandmother's love, modernized by passion. It sounded rehearsed, but her voice trembled just enough to be real. In the kitchen, Caleb was focused. Plates lined the counters like a miniature battlefield, each one waiting for something sacred. Emily joined him in silence, their movements synced. "You ready?" she whispered. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm still doing it." The first course rolled out, a simple roasted beet salad with rosemary vinaigrette, clean, familiar, and then elevated by the citrus twist. Caleb peeked through the kitchen window as the first bites were taken. One woman closed her eyes. Another nodded slowly to herself. By the third course, the seared scallops with herbed polenta, the room had gone nearly silent. It was the kind of quiet that meant people were tasting with reverence. Emily felt her pulse in her wrists, in her chest, everywhere. Caleb, too, was still, waiting to breathe. When the risotto came out, someone stood up to ask what was in the broth. Emily went to explain, laughing when she forgot the English name for one of the herbs. "We call it grandma leaf," she joked. The guests laughed with her. Caleb watched from the shadows and smiled. Madison leaned against the bar, whispering to a guest, "You're eating history with a twist." Someone took a photo of the plated dish. Another asked for the menu to be signed. Emily froze. "Signed?" The man smiled. "This was art. I want to remember it." In the kitchen, a dish slipped. Not Caleb's fault, but still enough to make him flinch. The plate shattered near his foot, sauce spilling like wine on tile. Emily knelt beside him. "It's okay," she said gently. "You don't break easily." He met her gaze, then nodded. Dessert was the apple crisp, served warm with a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream and a ribbon of caramel. Guests actually clapped, not out of politeness, but because they were full and happy and maybe a little nostalgic. Emily's throat tightened. After service, the restaurant emptied slowly, with lingering goodbyes and compliments left like tips at each table. Caleb stayed behind, cleaning surfaces already clean. Emily poured 2 glasses of cider and brought one to him. "We did it," she said softly. He took the glass but didn't drink. "They weren't just eating food," he said. "They were eating memories." Emily nodded. "That's what this place was built on." She paused. "But you made it breathe again." They sat on the back step behind the kitchen, the night air brushing over their skin like soft linen. Caleb rolled up his sleeves. Emily untied her apron. "I haven't felt this proud in years," she admitted, "and I didn't do it alone." He looked at her. "No, you didn't." There was a pause. Not awkward, just real. She looked at the stars. He looked at her. "Emily," he said, "if I say something stupid, can I pretend it was just the wine?" She smiled. "I'll allow it." "I don't want to leave when my time's up," he said. "Even if I have to." She looked at him, eyes searching. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I'm starting to feel like I belong somewhere, and it's not the kitchen." She leaned in first. He met her halfway. The kiss was slow, hesitant, and then sure. The kind of kiss that feels like truth. His hand slid behind her neck. Her fingers gripped his collar. The world narrowed to the two of them and the warm night. Air inside, they cleaned the last few things wordlessly, their hands occasionally brushing. Caleb turned off the lights while Emily locked the door. On the way out, he reached for her hand. She didn't flinch. Their fingers laced like it had always been that way. He walked her home even though she lived 5 minutes away. At the porch, she paused. "You want to come in?" she asked, almost shy. He didn't answer, just stepped forward. She unlocked the door and let the silence invite him in. The house smelled like vanilla and old books. She poured them each a small glass of red wine and turned on the record player. Soft jazz spilled into the quiet. Caleb stood behind her, his hands gently resting on her hips. "You really want this?" he asked. She turned in his arms. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't." And that was it. The moment broke open like a ripe peach. The kiss returned, deeper now. Clothes fell with care. Touches were slow, almost reverent. He held her like she was both breakable and the thing holding him together. They moved to the bedroom, the sheets still warm from the day. He traced the curve of her spine. She kissed the scar near his collarbone. No words. Just movement, breath, need, and something rising between them like trust wrapped in heat. Caleb woke with a start, sunlight pouring through the slats of his blinds. He groaned, reaching for his phone buzzing violently on the nightstand. "Yeah?" he answered, voice scratchy. You overslept, his father said sharply. Good thing I'm calling with news. There's a competition, national. Fire and Steel is doing a redemption arc series. They want you. Face still sells and your cooking didn't ruin your rep, just your mouth. Caleb sat up, rubbing his eyes. A team competition? Yes, his father confirmed. They'll assign one unless you pick your own. Let me think about it, Caleb muttered. No time, his father replied. Deadline's this week. Don't screw this up. The call ended. Caleb tossed, the phone on the bed staring at the ceiling. He liked living well, he hated failure. And this was his way back in. He got ready in under 10 minutes. Clean shirt, knife roll in hand. The walk to the restaurant was brisk and he tried not to rehearse any speeches. Maybe he'd just do the day and figure it out later. Maybe Emily wouldn't even look at him. Inside, the restaurant was quiet but still smelled like roasted garlic and pine wood smoke. Emily was wiping down the bar. Celeste moved briskly between shelves, writing down inventory. Morning, Caleb offered. Emily nodded, her eyes unreadable. Celeste replied, We're out of half the fresh stock. Last night cleaned us. Out, Celeste added, tucking her list into her coat. I'm heading to the market. You two hold the fort. She grabbed her keys and left with a wink. Caleb turned toward the kitchen, unsure what to expect. But his stomach twisted slightly. Before he could step past the pantry, Emily grabbed his sleeve. Her lips met his in a kiss that was hot, unapologetic, and far too fast for him to react. When she pulled back, she smirked. Still waking up, she teased, hands on his chest. I thought maybe I screwed everything up, Caleb muttered. You didn't, she said, eyes dancing. I was waiting to see if you'd kiss me first. Took too long? He exhaled, tension releasing from his shoulders. You could have warned me. Where's the fun in that? She teased. He grinned and leaned forward again, slower this time, brushing his lips against hers. The air between them pulsed, unspoken things blooming with heat. What if I said I wanted to wake up next to you tomorrow? She asked. Depends, he murmured. You a morning coffee or morning chaos type? Wouldn't you like to know? She said, stepping back. Let's just say I made dinner. After close tonight. Come hungry. Caleb nodded once. I will. The rest of the day passed with stolen glances, accidental touches, and a rhythm that felt dangerously close to home. That night, after wiping down the last table and locking the front door, Caleb followed her to her place. It was small, lived-in, warm. The walls smelled like spice and old wood. She'd set the table with care. 2 candles, 3 plates of food. No pretension. The food was humble but flawless. Roasted chicken with herbed butter, grilled peaches, with goat cheese and fresh cornbread. Caleb couldn't stop smiling between bites. Where'd you learn this? She shrugged. Just watching, tasting, trying. I grew up watching people enjoy what I made. After dinner, she poured wine and leaned on the couch, feet up, eyes relaxed. Still nervous? She asked. Always, he replied. That's how I know I still care. Then she kissed him again, slow and deeper this time, and led him to her room without a word. Their second night together wasn't rushed or quiet. It was full of soft laughter, tangled limbs, and long pauses where their foreheads touched and no one needed to speak. In the hush afterward, wrapped in her sheets, Caleb stared at the ceiling and broke the silence. Their second night together wasn't rushed or quiet. It was full of soft laughter, tangled limbs, and long pauses where their foreheads touched and no one needed to speak. In the hush afterward, wrapped in her sheets, Caleb stared at the ceiling and broke the silence. His voice was low, steady, still thick with everything they'd just shared. I saw something yesterday that got me thinking. Emily turned her, head slowly, brushing her cheek against his shoulder. "What did you see?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Caleb hesitated, then exhaled. "There's this culinary competition. Not a circus-type thing. Real chefs, real teams, real stakes." She blinked once. He continued, "I think we could enter." Her eyebrows rose. "We?" He nodded, shifting to face her. "You as the head chef, me as your support. The structure's solid. It's built for stories like yours. A local chef with deep roots and fresh voice. And I could handle the logistics, paperwork, submissions." His hand moved to hers gently. Emily narrowed her eyes, unsure whether he was joking or dreaming. "Caleb, I run a 5-table diner and cook from memory. I'm not built for TV food fights." He shook his head. "That's exactly why it would work. Your food is honest. Your story's honest. You're not chasing stardom, and that makes it powerful." He sat up against the headboard, sheets pooling around his waist. "You've got history in your hands. Your grandmother's recipes, your vision. It's a perfect angle. If we make it into the top 4, we'd get national attention. I'm talking sponsorships, features, and maybe franchise potential." His voice softened. "You're serious?" Emily asked, half laughing now. "Franchises?" "Yes," Caleb said, watching her face carefully. "This place could become something much bigger, not because it's flashy, but because it's real. I believe in that. I believe in you." Her cheeks flushed, but she looked away. "You're insane." "Maybe," he smiled, "but I'm the kind of insane that sees potential and runs with it." She was silent for a while, eyes drifting over the ceiling. Then, almost too quietly, she asked, "Have you done something like this before? Is that why you're here? Looking for someone to turn into a story?" The question hung between them, like steam in the air. Caleb sat still, searching her expression, then spoke. "No, I'm not here chasing talent. I came here trying to fix what I broke, and I didn't find a product. I found you." He paused. "I'm not looking to rewrite my story. I want to help build yours." "I've made mistakes, yeah," he admitted, gaze steady, "and I've been given second chances. But this," he motioned gently around her room to the space between them, "this feels different. You're different. You're what makes this idea work." Emily bit her lip, the weight of it all settling slowly in her chest. Not saying yes," she whispered. "Not yet." "Fair," he replied, already reaching for the notebook he had tucked into his bag earlier. "So, I'm sending you something." He unlocked his phone and forwarded the full competition dossier to her. Timeline, format, guidelines, read it, think on it. She accepted the incoming file but didn't open it right away. "You're hard to pin down, Caleb. Sometimes you're this quiet mystery. Other times you're pitching national rollouts. Like it's Sunday brunch." He laughed softly. "If I ever become predictable, hit me with a rolling pin." Emily laughed despite herself, then tucked her head under his chin. "I'll read it," she said after a pause. "And I'll let—" No promises." "That's all I'm asking," Caleb replied, his lips brushing the top of her hair. "Take your time, but I hope you say yes." He didn't press her again. The rest of the night passed in quiet murmurs, a touch here, a sigh there. Sleep eventually came, but not before Caleb watched her drift off beside him, unsure if he was building something real or daring too much too soon. Either way, he was in it now. The next morning, Emily was already up, moving through her kitchen in a t-shirt and old socks, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. Caleb stayed back, just watching, taking it in. That domestic rhythm, those ordinary moments, they stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years. She handed him a mug without a word, sipping from her own and opening the email on her phone. "This is a lot," she said eventually. "Sponsors. Elimination rounds. Team scoring." He nodded. "It's not a walk in the park, but it's real. If we win, it changes everything." Emily leaned against the counter, scrolling through details, eyes narrowing as she read. "You already mapped out which recipes we could use?" "Yeah," Caleb replied. "Started jotting them down yesterday. Yours, your grandma's, your tweaks. It's got heart and heritage. That's gold in this kind of contest." "You really think I could run that kind of kitchen?" she asked. He looked up from his mug. "I don't just think it, I know it." She exhaled slowly, staring down at her phone. Caleb didn't push again. He just waited, letting her feel the weight of her own decision. Finally, she said, "You'll be in the back, following orders." "Yes, chef," he replied, a small smirk playing on his lips. "No showing off, no temper." "Scout's honor," he said, holding up 2 fingers. She gave him a long look, then chuckled. "I didn't say yes." "But you're close," he said, stepping closer, brushing her fingers. She let him, that familiar warmth rising in her chest. "Close enough to consider it," she murmured. He kissed her hand. "That's all I needed to hear." Emily wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the clock. The restaurant had just closed, and Caleb was finishing the final tally for the week's orders. She approached him with a quiet certainty in her voice. "I'll do it," she said. "The competition. I'm in." Caleb looked up, surprised but calm. He nodded once, closing the notepad slowly. "Okay, good," he said, then stood. "But tonight, you're coming to my place. There's something I need to tell you, something I've never told any woman before." His voice was steady, but there was tension beneath. Emily arrived at his apartment just as the sun began to fade behind the trees. The hallway outside his door smelled faintly of cedar, and when he opened it, she noticed his expression was more serious than usual. He didn't speak right away, just stepped aside so she could enter. The space was warm, minimalist, and full of soft light. She paused near the entrance, taking in the design. Clean shelves, warm wood tones, and a framed photograph of some forgotten coastline. "Nice place," she said with a teasing tone. "You must be really underpaid here." Chuckled quietly, then leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Come on," he said, gently taking her hand. She followed him past the kitchen to a simple dining table where his MacBook was open and waiting. He sat, opened a browser tab, and turned the screen toward her. A YouTube channel page appeared, lit up with millions of subscribers. Her brow lifted. As she saw his face, younger, sharper, and cockier, in dozens of thumbnails. He clicked one. It played a montage of flashy interviews, kitchen takeovers, and high-profile events. "You were famous?" she asked, eyes still on the screen. Her voice wasn't judgmental, just surprised. The man in the videos looked so far from the Caleb she knew. This version threw knives with a grin, and insulted dishes with polished cruelty. "I was," he said simply. "A lot of flash, a lot of noise. People worshipped the food and tolerated the man behind it. Eventually my ego caught up with me. My father and his partners kicked me out, said I was burning down what I helped build." She didn't interrupt. Instead, she clicked another video, the one where everything unraveled. The headlines were ruthless, the comment sections even worse. He looked hollow in that footage, like someone who'd forgotten what he actually loved about cooking. "They sent me here," he continued, "to disappear. Stay out of the spotlight while they cleaned up the mess. I agreed because losing my lifestyle scared me more than losing my name. I thought I could wait it out. But then I met you." Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, then slowly pulled away. She looked up at him, eyes full of layered thoughts. And the competition, she asked? You said you had a better idea. Was that just about scouting new talent? Caleb leaned forward. No. It was about redemption. But not for the version of me on that screen. For this version. The one who learned how to be quiet. To listen. To love something again. You changed that. You made food feel real. He held her gaze. You're my better idea. I want the world to see what I see in you. I want them to taste your story, your grandmother's recipes, your strength. I don't want to go back to that world unless you're leading the way. She blinked slowly, processing. Her voice, when it came, was soft. You'd really go back as my second? He nodded. If we placed in the top 4, it could change everything. Your restaurant could become a name. You could open more. Build something lasting. Emily stood and walked away from the table, staring at one of the bookshelves. Her hand brushed the edge of a small sculpture. You should have told me sooner, she said. I would have thought differently, or maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. He moved to her side, standing close but not touching. I know, he said. At first I didn't think this would matter, that I'd stay a few months, keep quiet. But then I saw the way you slice tomatoes, how you hum when the dough rises, and I unraveled. She turned toward him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed how much this meant. I'm not sure I know how to handle this yet. He stepped even closer and whispered, I don't need you to handle anything. I just need you to know it's real. Then, softly, I was afraid you'd walk away if I told you the whole truth. But I'd rather risk that than keep pretending. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm not letting fear ruin that. She studied him for a moment, as if looking for cracks. Then finally she smiled, small, vulnerable, but there. You might need to start paying rent somewhere else, she joked. There's no way you can afford this place without a network deal. He laughed, a deep, relieved sound. Probably not, he admitted. But I'd live in a broom closet if it meant I could wake up next to you, every day, and call it ours. His hand found hers again, and this time she didn't hesitate to hold on. They kissed there in the amber light of early evening, surrounded by a silence that wasn't empty. It was full of truths finally spoken, of walls coming down. When he pulled her closer, it was without need to perform. He just was. Later that night in his bed, their skin spoke where words paused. He didn't touch her like a man trying to impress. He touched her like a man who finally felt safe. And when she whispered his name with her head resting on his chest, he exhaled everything he'd been holding in. Their breaths slowed together. Time felt suspended. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt clean. Not of mistakes, but of lies. He'd told her everything, and she hadn't left. In fact, she was still there, tracing her fingers along the scar just below his ribs. I didn't know I could feel this free, he murmured. She smiled against his skin and whispered, That's what happens when you stop hiding. And with that, they both drifted into the kind of sleep that only honesty can offer. Caleb opened the door to his real apartment, and Emily stopped in her tracks. The view overlooked a stretch of skyline wrapped in glass and quiet privilege. Everything inside shimmered. Sleek furniture, abstract art, untouched wine bottles lined on a marble bar. This is where you really live? She asked, half smiling. He nodded, setting their bags down. It was easier to pretend I didn't belong here when I was trying to forget who I was. She wandered in, running her hand across the back of a velvet chair. The place wasn't just expensive. It whispered legacy, weight, and pressure. They spent 2 quiet hours together, unpacking the silence between them. Then came the knock. When Caleb opened the door, his father stepped in like he owned the oxygen, tailored suit, no smile. Behind him stood a sleek man, the current CEO of Caleb's former empire. Well, his father said, looking Emily up and down like she was a scratched plate. Is this the woman we're supposed to build a campaign around? I don't see the angle. No hook, no prestige, no leverage. Caleb's jaw tensed. Emily stood frozen. Caleb stepped in. She's the reason I'm even considering this. I told you, I won't go back unless she leads. If you want a story of transformation, this is it. The CEO raised a brow, curious, but said nothing. Caleb's father laughed once, dry and dismissive. That's your condition? The CEO asked calmly. You'll compete only if she's the lead and you assist? Caleb nodded once. The man didn't laugh, he just exhaled. We'll discuss, he said, and they left without shaking hands or even saying goodbye. That night, Emily lay beside Caleb in the softest sheets she'd ever known, staring at the ceiling. The silence was thick. Then gently she whispered, I'm not made for that world. I don't think I ever was. Her voice was apologetic, almost afraid. He turned toward her. What are you saying? She touched his chest, where his heart beat slow and steady. I mean, I want to go home, I'm sorry. I know what this means for you and I hate that. But I don't want to be someone I'm not. He took a deep breath. It does mean something to me. But if this isn't right for you, I'd never want you to force it. She nodded, her fingers lacing into his. I just need to be back where I know who I am. Okay, he said. Let me handle a few things first. The next morning he was quiet, distant. The drive to the airport wasn't full of long conversations, just glances, passing thoughts, and a goodbye that weighed, more than either of them said aloud. At the gate he kissed her forehead and said, Text me when you land. On the flight home, Emily watched clouds drift by like questions unanswered. Her phone buzzed once with a work message, then went silent again. She thought about the dinners. They had the way he'd order her wine without asking, always getting it right. She remembered the rooftop breakfast overlooking the city, the way he held her hand like it was something delicate and strong at the same time. How he adjusted her chair before she sat. How he never corrected her ideas, only built on them at ease. Home. Her place felt smaller than she remembered. The kettle screamed for attention while she scrolled through old pictures on her phone, snapshots of luxury, smiles in borrowed sunlight. She brewed her tea, holding the warmth with both hands. Then she typed a message. Hi, Caleb. I just wanted to say thank you. These months with you were more than I imagined. I learned so much. About food, about ambition, about love. But mostly, I learned that you belong in a world I was only visiting. You don't need to reply. I just needed to tell you that I'll be cheering you on from here. Subscribe to your channel. I'll be the first to like every video. And if you ever find your way back to my world, I'll probably still have flour on my apron. She pressed send and stared at the screen. The text marked as delivered. No. Typing bubbles followed. Just quiet. She walked to her window and looked out at her familiar street. The wind carried nothing extraordinary, and that was oddly comforting. The days that followed weren't tragic. They were simply quiet. She went back to the restaurant, hugged Celeste, and caught up on supply lists and repairs. The kitchen felt like hers again, but a ghost of Caleb lingered in the corner of every new idea. She wore a blue sweater one evening, the same one she had on when he first complimented her spice rub. The memory burned sweet. She didn't cry. She just turned the burner on and whispered, "You're still here somehow," to the empty room. No one else noticed the change. To customers, she was just Emily again, calm, capable, focused. But when she chopped onions, her breath caught in her throat a little more than before. and when someone asked about the night menu, she paused before replying. That Friday, she opened her laptop and clicked on his YouTube channel. There were no new uploads yet. The last video was still his final apology before leaving the public eye. She stared at it, wondering if he was watching her back. She almost closed the tab, but something stopped her. A notification popped up. New upload scheduled. The best thing I ever tasted. Release, 2 days. A thumbnail showed a simple plate. She blinked, heart kicking once in her chest. She didn't know what it meant, not yet. But for now she turned the lights off in her little kitchen and whispered to no one. Maybe you're not so far away, after all. 2 days later, Emily was restless. She cleaned every counter in the restaurant twice, paced the same stretch of sidewalk 4 times, and brewed 3 cups of tea she never drank. At 8:12 p.m., the channel still showed scheduled. Her heart pounded. The night had already dipped into quiet when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Caleb stood there, tired, smirking, and carrying 2 massive suitcases. His eyes held a familiar fire. "It's not much," he said, glancing down at the bags. "I kept the clothes I actually like. The rest I sold, gave away, or torched. Can I crash here for a few days until I find a place that fits a chef's salary?" His voice was lighter than she remembered. Emily didn't answer. She launched herself into his arms with a sound that was more breath than word. He barely managed to pull the suitcases inside and kicked the door shut before her lips were on his neck, her hands already tugging at his buttons. Clothes trailed from the front, door to the couch like breadcrumbs of longing. They didn't make it to the bedroom. Love claimed the floor, the walls, and the spaces between unspoken doubts. For the first time, they weren't afraid to ruin anything. She kissed his chest and whispered, "You gave it all up." He brushed her hair back, pulling her tighter. "No, I traded up." They laid there, limbs tangled, skin flushed, breath sinking. The city outside faded into nothingness. When the room finally stilled, and the silence wrapped around them like a second sheet, Emily shifted slightly. "So, what's this video that's going up in 2 days?" she asked, fingers tracing his arm. "Are you leaving again?" He chuckled softly, brushing her cheek. "No, it's a new start. I figured I'll need a side hustle now, and cooking shows bring views. I want to film our life here. The kitchen, our chaos. If you're okay with being on camera sometimes," Nicole blinked, overwhelmed. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," he said, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'll split everything, even the ad revenue. You're half of the story now, Em. Honestly, the better half." Her laugh cracked and melted into tears. "I'm sorry you had to give up so much," she whispered, the tears rolling freely now. He held her tight, his voice steady. "There was no so much without you. That life, those rooms, those suits, it was just echo. You're the music." She clutched him, her tears dampening his chest. "I don't know how to build that kind of life." He kissed her temple. "We'll build our own, smaller, messier, real, the kind where the flower never fully leaves your hands and love gets into everything." They moved to the couch, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't big enough for 2, which made it perfect. Emily tucked her feet under his legs, her head on his shoulder. "You sure you're okay with this life?" she asked, one last time. He smiled, without hesitation. "I've never been more sure of anything. I finally get to wake up and cook without pretending. I get to love without hiding. And someday," he paused, looking into her eyes, "we'll build a place that smells like your grandma's kitchen." She closed her eyes, letting the image sink into her bones. A place with a line out the door on Sundays? He grinned. A place where everyone feels at home. Where the chef's apron is stained and the assistant's heart is full. Outside, the wind swept through the quiet town, carrying the scent of lilacs and wood smoke. Inside, Caleb typed a new title for the video, The Life I Never Knew I Needed. Emily leaned over his shoulder, added a smiley face, and kissed his cheek. The next morning, the camera was set up in the kitchen. Caleb burned the toast. Emily forgot the mic was on and cursed at the flour. Celeste walked in, saw them fumbling, and said, "God help us." And that's how the show started. The audience grew fast. People didn't subscribe for polish. They subscribed for heart, for Caleb's quiet redemption, for Emily's stubborn warmth, for the recipes that came with stories, and the laughter that always echoed behind the scenes. 3 months later, they'd hired 2 helpers and still worked 16 hours a day. 6 months later, they bought the building next door, Emily's. Grandma's recipes were printed on menu boards, and Caleb's name never appeared first. 1 year later, at a local food festival, they were invited to judge a small-town cooking competition. The same company that once fired Caleb sponsored the event. He smiled, shook hands, and walked away with her hand in his. As they stood outside their restaurant that night, string lights overhead and soft music from a nearby violinist floating. Through the air, Emily whispered, "You sure we're not dreaming?" Caleb kissed her, slow and certain. "If we are," he said, "don't wake me."